I have read your book, The Gift of Maybe, and I have so many thoughts and questions around it that I want to talk about. But before we get into all of that, I want to understand your path a little bit because I I'm trying to understand how you went from lawyer to coaching people in this wonderful space of maybe. And then along the way, you also have this women's center that is amazing. So help me go through. In your book, you open with the story of the farmer. And so help me understand your path and how you ended up where you are.
Okay, well, for me, I was always a worrier. And I've since learned that I was addicted to certainty. So if I didn't know what was going to happen next in my life, I projected things were going to be bad or they weren't going to work out. So this was kind of my life story. Yeah, and it was at a very young age. I mean, I overreacted to the uncertainty of a boy liking me or a grade or what I was going to do with my life. So I probably had more of a propensity at a young age. I think what's interesting is that I've noticed the people around me, their addiction to certainty has captured them later in life. And I think I was just a highly sensitive person. So when I hit 14 years old, I try to manage it in my own way. So I write this huge story that I'm going to become a lawyer. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to marry this great guy, and really believing that the balloons are going to come down and life's going to be wonderful. And so for a while, I managed life like that. Like I noticed that I was always thinking about the future. I didn't have a I was more stressed and anxious than the people around me. But because I had this story running that I was going to be saved one day, which a lot of us believe. A lot of us believe that if this one thing happens, life will we be wonderful and I'll be fine. Um, and so I ran the story. I went to law school, got the great job, married the guy who I always say I thought was was great at the time. And I remember, and I actually did a TEDx talk recently, and I described walking to work that day feeling like I was in the opening scene of the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Hmm.
Let me just make sure I shut all these things off so they don't click in. And really feeling great. My wedding had been a couple weeks before, and the first day of work went fine, but the second day of work, they come in and they tell us they're firing half the first year. The economy had fallen. And I didn't get fired, but I think the jolt of
Mhm.
actually believing that I was going to arrive in a moment in my life where I wouldn't have the anxiety and the stress because I knew what life was about. I mean, it sounds kind of silly as I say it, but I actually believed it.
Yeah.
It just captured me in a way that I really fell apart. And
Mhm.
I probably was falling apart all along, but I was holding this idea. And maybe, I benefited from it because maybe it brought me to this moment where I was able to get through law school and get a great job, but I spun out. I life had no certainty. There was no stories I could tell. I started not sleeping, anxiety, stress. And then I started to do alternative things like meditate, um, veganism, and these things helped.
Mhm.
But the minute something uncertain happened, I spun out. And that's where the story of the farmer comes in.
Mhm.
And when I heard that story, I actually felt a pop in my chest. My entire life changed in that moment
Mhm.
because
Who told you that story? Just recap real quick.
oh,
Yeah.
I started taking Qigong,
Okay.
and he was a master of Qigong. And I walked in and I was like, oh my goodness, my mother's not well. This is happening. That's happening. Blah, 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 blah. And he just put his hands up and he's like, I'm going to tell you a story.
Mhm.
And he told me the farmer story.
Mhm.
And in that moment, it was funny. I felt the pop in the chest, but I didn't really know what was happening. And we went through the Qigong session. And when I got home, my thoughts started to run again because I'd already left the law firm because I had thought that even though I knew there was no certainty, I was still jumping around. Like I knew, but I was still like, oh, I'm going to do this and then I'll feel better. I'll leave the law firm. It must be the law firm. It must be the client. It must be my friend. So I had this awareness, but you still look for the outside to soothe your soul. right? You look for the stability. But that night, my mind started running. I don't have enough clients. I'm not going to be able to, my business consulting uh business is going to fail.
There's
Uh
nothing more uncertain than working for yourself.
a- Absolutely. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Right? And so and then all of a sudden I remembered the farmer. And one little word, I was like, well, maybe that thought's not true. And maybe everything's okay. And it sounds so simple, but we are absolute about fear. We are absolute about our doubts. And the beauty is if nothing's certain, neither are our doubts or our fears. And in that moment, it just flipped on me. And then over time, I started to see, wow, if I want my life to change, it has to happen in the unknown. Wait, uncertainty is my best friend. So I started to like really dig it, and it was private. I was never going to share it with another soul. I was really jazzing. I was like, wow, I was like, I'm feeling great. Like maybe this will happen, maybe that. And I'm feeling so different. I never thought to share it with another person. And then the 2008 crash happened. And I started to go see my business consulting clients, and a lot of them had been my law clients because I went from being a tax lawyer at a big firm to having my own law practice, thinking it was the big law firm that was my problem. And then as I kept awakening, I was like, oh, the law, we're just repeating our problems. I have an accounting degree, I'll become a business consultant.
Mhm.
So I walk into one of my clients. He had a beautiful antique shop in New York City, and he was reeling. He had not paid his rent. I had no idea he hadn't paid his personal rent. He had no sales, and he's sitting there, and no matter what I said to him, because I think what happens is that we all want to go back to the stability we had yesterday.
Mhm.
So he just wanted me to help him get back to the profit and loss statement he had before the crash.
Mhm.
And that's what we do. We want to go back to that place. We remember the place when we felt safe, and then we get attached to it, and we believe this moment's not right. There's something wrong with the moment. So then we go into full resistance.
Mhm.
We're stressed, we're worried,
Mhm.
and we're spinning because when you're resisting, you can't land. And then you have no opening. You're not in the moment
Mhm.
to look at what's really happening, and you're not open to something new. So I'm struggling. This has been my client for so long. I have helped him through breakups and leases gone bad and business, and there's nothing that I could say to this man because you couldn't get credit. The clients weren't coming. The world had changed, and he was still operating on the old system. And out of, I don't know if it was desperation, but I didn't know what else to do. And I just told him the farmer story.
Yeah.
And then my interpretation of it. And all of a sudden his mind shifted because he was so busy thinking, I'm stuck, nothing's working out. I need to go back to the way it was yesterday. This idea of maybe questioned his fear, questioned his doubt, and allowed him to be like, well, maybe the, this could turn out differently than I expected. Maybe I can make a different decision. And we didn't complete our discussion. He says, I'll call you tomorrow. Called me tomorrow. And he was like, with this idea of maybe, he goes, I'm closing my shop. I'm going online. I'm moving to Brooklyn.
Mhm.
He started a furniture line. He still has a vibrant business today. But I met him at that moment that he was literally going to go out of business.
Yeah.
And so that experience, I was like, so I went to every client, and they all weathered the storm, and they all love maybe, like they're like maybe junkies, you know what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
again, it sounds simple, right?
So you went
But
from business consulting to mindset consulting.
right, and it sounds simple, right? But if you think about it, we live in the maybe not. We live in the past wanting, regretting what happened, or wanting the past to come back.
Mhm.
We're afraid of the future because we think life's not going to work out and things can't get better. And then the only place where we create is in the moment.
Yeah.
And we're not present because we're so afraid we're not okay.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Deep down, everybody wants to be okay. And that's the whole game. And this little word kind of questions your feeling that you're not okay because it reminds you that, yeah, there's the maybe not, but because you can't know, you're still in the game. Because you can't know, there's infinite possibility. So I just kept going with it. And so I kept business consulting and I kept doing this work. And then someone offered me a deal to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea what I was doing. I literally sat down and I'm like, oh, I was not a writer. I'm like, I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I handed this fellow had connected me with his representative in New York, and I handed him the book, and he's like, you need to go back to school, or you need to there.
Oh
And
no.
I was a maybe
No.
junkie. So I was like, all right, maybe. And then I had some friends who were writers, and I wrote a proposal and I sent it out to three agents. And this really amazing, she's passed on since, agent from California hooked into maybe. And
Mm.
so, she made me start a blog. She made me do all these things. And yeah, and then I just eventually got a deal. I had to self-publish it, and then it got on the bestseller list, and then Penguin Random House bought it.
Nice.
So I'm always in maybe.
Yeah.
So I don't get stuck. It's not that I don't feel like we have to allow our feelings, but there's a difference between allowing our feelings and still realizing that there's an open road in front of us. And so that's how it happened. And then out of nowhere, my husband leaves me.
Mm.
And it's funny. I believe in a way that I wrote the book for myself in a way because I'm 2 nights in knowing he's leaving me, crying on the floor. And
Mm.
I open the gift of maybe. And
Mm.
on page 6, it says my biggest fears. And one of them was, would my husband always love me?
Mm.
And
Wow.
I'm like, who wrote this? Did I write this?
Right. Right.
And this tiny, tiny, tiny little part of me in that moment knew that I had maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I was devastated. I was crying. I was
Yeah.
distraught.
Yeah.
But I knew that because the future was uncertain,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe I could live through this.
Yeah.
And so, and and one of my consultants, the Motherhood Center of New York, called me in the middle of it and
Mm-hmm.
said, I was their business consultant. Do you want to come in? Because her partner just left. And I was like,
Oh.
maybe.
So that's how it comes.
So
Yeah.
that's how
Like,
it
where
comes.
did
I
that
was
come
I
from?
was in a state
Yeah.
of maybe
Wow.
any time. Yeah. So that's how. So now I do everything. I'm the CFO general counsel, business operator for this gorgeous center in New York called the Motherhood Center, and they help women with postpartum depression. Sometimes women have these anxiety periods when they're pregnant. Sometimes it's post.
Yeah.
But, some women have mild anxiety and some women have psychosis.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful place. We're all women.
Yeah.
And I still write and podcast and kind of I live in this open field. So that I know it was a long description, but
No,
that
that's great. That's a great wind up, and I'd gotten pieces of it. I was missing the Motherhood Center piece of it, which I'm really grateful for, and I'm excited to talk about this because I come from life in a different direction of like my mother died when I was 7, and like I faced homelessness right after high school, and then was I have chronic illness, so I faced a medical crisis where I had to resign from what I thought was my dream job and all of these things. So from a very young age, I was very comfortable living inside my head in an imaginary world. Like I think when my mom died, like whether it was books or whatever, I loved to fantasize and I loved to imagine all the things that I could do and become. So the idea of maybe is kind of natural to me because it was my escape mechanism, if that made sense, is what else is possible because I was hurting so much that I could disappear into this dream world. But in that process, I also struggle with a lot of self-worth issues. And am I worthy of this, whatever I was fantasizing about? And then, and I know you have a follow-up book with the maybe everything is okay. And this is kind of where I get to because then I also had my dad, and my stepmom, and they were reading all of my report cards if I'm not living up to my potential, and she's always daydreaming out the window and all of these things. And so at the that whole time I was always being told to be realistic and what are your goals and da 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 da. So I'm out here in la la land, as they would call it, and they're trying to nail my feet to the floor. So how do you, I guess, how do you come to that with two-pronged question with self-worth, being worthy of those maybes and understanding that when you tap into the infinite possibilities that you are worthy of each and every one of them. And at the same time, how do you tell parents it's okay for them to be a little bit of a dreamer and exist in that realm of maybe?
Well, the easier answer is the parent answer. And the reason why we are obsessed with our children getting the grade, getting, into the right school is because we're afraid they're not going to be okay.
Right.
So we're grappling, right? So, like for me, there's two aspects of parenting, and there's the need for our kids to be okay, right? So that's the whole thing. But there are two pieces of it. One is are just attachment that there's someone in my life that means more than me,
Mhm.
that I love more than myself. So I need them to be okay. But
Right.
there's also our inability to be comfortable with uncertainty. So what's happening with parenting is that for me, all I discovered was I'll always be attached.
Mhm.
I'll always suffer on some level because when they suffer, I suffer. But if I know that life is uncertain and I know within that field there's infinite possibilities, then I'm not going to be so rigid
Mhm.
and crazy and fixated on every little thing that happens. And I'm going to have a little more trust that there's a human being in front of me with a life's path.
Yeah.
And I can have more trust in that because I know the maybe of life. I know that a child cannot do well in school and become, I was almost say the president of the United States, but like,
Well, we are kind of there.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like
Yeah.
anything is possible. So when I embrace maybe, I wasn't as rigid at every moment. So I think, you had, sounds like you had, a father and a stepmother who were really vested in your okayness, but didn't understand that there are many ways to be okay. So with maybe, I think your parents, it would have been a different experience. I'm just shutting off my phone. It would have been a different experience because I think they might have said, "Hey, let's see how you could focus a little bit more on your studies, but at the same time, like, what are you dreaming about?"
Yeah.
And like, that's so cool. That's how I was. I was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool. Like, how could we make this happen?"
Yeah. I think
Like,
I overcorrected. My kids, I have two older daughters and I have a 9-year-old son. So I have a 29-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 9-year-old. I have my son when I was 40. But my older daughters would always tell me, be careful what you tell mom your dreams are because she will help you make them come true. And so I think I didn't let them exist in the realm of maybe. I'm like, oh, you wanna play the whatever, let's go, or you wanna be this, let's see what
yeah.
classes there are, let's see what, and they're like, mom, we're just dreaming over here.
Yeah, but I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. Like I always say, sometimes I wonder, like I keep my feet kind of in two places. Like I'm very present, I'm very in the moment, but I know that everything is impossible. Everything's possible. And what's so interesting too is that I see a lot of people have a lot of instability right now with the world. And for me, my reaction is I'm looking and I'm like, oh, look, there are a lot of people I don't agree with. And I sometimes I refer to it as like a dark energy.
Hmm.
And but they're fearless. Like they're fearless in the dark. So I'm thinking to myself, fearlessness is fearlessness. So I feel actually more fearlessness in the light because I know, like, oh, there are different rules here. There's more ability to go do things. So, like, for me, I'm always charged by that. I'm like,
Mhm.
what's possible? Like, it is limitless. So that I think is the parenting piece that if you could be more, and maybe you're not gonna, you know, promote your child dropping out of school when they're in seventh grade.
Right.
At the same time, you're not going to be like, oh my God, they need to be a lawyer. Like you kind of lean in and see and discover who your child is with no fear because you realize, wait, they have a path and they came here with a purpose. And so how can I foster that and realize that so much more is possible than I know in this moment? So I think you parent better. It's not that you're not going to feel a
Right.
lot of things, but it's just fear and loving and
Always.
wanting things to be okay.
Yeah. So how do you set goals while also existing in this realm of anything's possible? Because I feel like sometimes that's what overwhelms me. I see all that's possible and I'm like, okay, how do I pick one in a direction to go in? Talk
Yeah.
to me about how you do that.
Before that, I just want to go back
Oh, sure.
to your statement. No, I just want to ask you a question that you, as a child, you were dreaming and you were in a lot of pain. And it's what's interesting is I almost equate it with I was addicted to certainty
Hmm.
and I wrote a story that sustained me. And
Hmm.
so I think just like you said, like you overcorrected maybe for your kids, in a way you were overcorrecting when you were young because no one came to you and said, "Oh, Bonnie, can I help you with your pain?" So
Hmm.
what we do sometimes is we overcorrect for the ability that we have.
Hmm.
So I think what was happening when you were young is you had the ability to dream big and you had the ability to live in uncertainty and you had ability to like imagine you could be all these things because nobody was cultivating and helping you with the pain,
Hmm.
right? And
That's
so you overcorrected, but at the same time, you still were you had a power. And so that overcorrection kind of in a way, yeah, you overcorrected and didn't deal with the pain at the time. So yeah, the perfect scenario would have been they hired, three therapists and and we got but you used your greatest gift and as a child that's all you knew and it saved you, but then you had to deal with the rest later.
right.
That's kind of how I see your experience. So, and it's
Yeah,
interesting that you
totally.
said you overcorrected when you were parenting because
Yeah.
that's your greatest power. Remember, even our greatest power has a back.
Hmm.
Everything has a front and a back,
Hmm.
right? So if I'm not, totally centered throughout the day, I could overuse something. Like I realized that by the time my husband had left me, I was more spiritually elevated than I was emotionally elevated
Hmm.
because I was so gifted spiritually. I never thought, oh, why don't you go to a therapist? I don't need a therapist. I'm spiritually gifted. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it saved you, but I'm sure
Yeah.
you hit a point that you had to deal with the
Oh,
pain,
absolutely. Yeah.
and then you bring it back. So
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
gift saved you, but
Yeah.
I almost say you play, you pay.
Yeah.
And like, you know what I'm saying? You played it hard and you paid later, but yet
Yeah.
it because here you are with the
Right.
hope and possibility. So that's what I'm
Mm.
only saying I don't know for sure, but that was my experience, and I have a feeling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it's
goodness
right
in a
on.
way. Thank
Mhm.
goodness in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people get scared. And then going back to your question about the goals,
Yeah.
a lot of people get scared that maybe is indecisive.
Mm.
But what maybe we're in the maybe not. That's how I look at it. Like there are a lot of people who I'm very goal oriented. I
Mm.
love to dream. I love to make plans. But at the same time, if I'm in the maybe not, then I'm not going to make those plans.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
I think maybe's not the problem. I think sometimes actually positive thinking's the problem in a way. Like you start a business and you're like, I know this is going to work. I know I'm going to make 100 grand this year. I know I'm going to get these things.
Yeah.
And life's happening and you're like, no, I know this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Because life gave you a sign and you didn't pivot,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You're either going to be a delusional positive thinker or eventually the negative thinking is going to come in and it's going to crash you.
Right.
And what's so interesting about maybe is you're sitting here at a meeting and you start this business and you believe you're going to make 100 grand and someone comes to you and says, the market changed.
Mhm.
And you're like, okay, well, I know life has maybe. I know I love this business, but
Mhm.
maybe there's something else I need to consider. So what maybe does, it kind of allows you to be it allows you to always be hopeful
Mhm.
because you know that no one knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And I really believe what I always say, what you are seeking is seeking you.
Mm.
And
I
that's what
love
you were
that.
doing when you were young. You were
I love that.
connected to there was something in the universe calling you, and
Mm.
you were just like, I'm gonna sit here. It was real. It
Mm.
was real. Yes, maybe you didn't take care of your other stuff,
Yeah.
but seriously, like if you're feeling something, it's because there's something pulling you. And that's what drives people crazy. How could I have this dream and not see it in front of my eyes? So in
Yeah.
a way, that's such a gift. A lot of people would be like, I can't see it, it
Yeah.
can't happen. But
Yeah.
that's not true. It's just it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So I find what maybe is it allows you to stay hopeful because
Mhm.
you know that life's uncertain.
Mhm.
And if it just because it hasn't happened yet, it could still happen.
Mhm.
It allows you to sit on that call and be like, okay, well, maybe I'm not doomed because people give you all these problems all day long,
Mhm.
right? And so either you're going to be a positive thinker and be like, no, no, it's going to work out.
Mhm.
But maybe you could say you don't lose the hope. You could be like, okay, well, maybe there's another way to get there.
Yeah.
One of my favorite maybe statements is maybe there are many ways to be okay.
Yeah.
Maybe so it it makes you not rigid. It allows you not to live in the maybe not.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm in business all day long, but I'm always in maybe. So
Yeah.
when I get news that's devastating, I'll be like, okay, well, maybe this will change and maybe we could handle this. When I get something surprising that changes my plan, I'm like, okay, well, my goal is to make this center successful,
Yeah.
but maybe I need to take another path. So for me, it you hold the hope and you stay with everything that's possible, and at the same time you hold the goal. And
It's wild. Yeah. Yeah. I'm connecting because in 2010, when I married my husband, that was when I was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. And so I went through a stage where, and I still struggle with daily chronic illness, but I was bedridden for like 6 months while they figured out what medicine worked for me as my joints swelled up and I couldn't walk and all of these things. I had to quit my full-time job that I thought was my dream job as the executive director of a community center. And I was moonlighting as a freelance writer on the side. And I mourned that and I fell into a depression, all of those things. And then when they found the right medication for me and I bounced back and I got my quality of life back, I was able to start freelancing as a writer full time. And I don't think I would have ever made the plunge to be a full-time writer had I not been forced to quit my job. I'm going to
yeah.
choke up and I'm sorry. But yeah, so it's like when life happens that way, but in the moment I didn't have that gift of maybe. I was in the throes of chronic illness. And if anybody would have ever told me that, I would have probably been really pissed off.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
you know, you have to feel your feelings,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And now you have your maybe story in a way, like sometimes we have to live it.
Yeah.
Like when people come up to me and they say, look at you today, you're so successful. It's so good you're not with your ex-husband anymore.
Yeah.
I want to go and I will.
All right.
Why? Because it's in a way, it's like I suffered so much
Mhm.
and it's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected. And so I always tell people it doesn't matter if the best is happening or you have to make the best of it. Same result.
Yeah.
So for you,
Yeah.
obviously you were in a lot of pain and you made the best of it.
Yeah.
And because you made the best of it, you're looking back and you could say, well, I'm not happy that I had that illness, but maybe it was best that I don't have that job anymore. It we don't know. So for me, I look back and I'm like, wow, it's like there's so many things that I was hiding about myself and so many things I needed to develop. And I made the most of what happened to me. And I see how I was living before.
Mhm.
But sometimes, we experience so much pain, it's hard to. So for me, I always say, whether it was the best or I made the best of it, here I am.
Yeah.
And that's an easier way for me. But some people are like, yeah, that's the best thing. I know people who've had cancer and they're like, best thing never happened to me. So,
Yeah.
you know, it for me, like when I say that, I think it almost doesn't matter. Like for you, maybe the best was happening, or maybe you just made the best of it, but you found your way
Mhm.
and you're on your path. And the universe obviously you know, had
Yeah.
had kind of like involvement in it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you seem like you but
Yeah.
also you also have this dreamy thing about you. Like you do live in this infinite world. So I guess you're thinking now, wow, living in this infinite world, had I had maybe,
Mhm.
I would have had a little less suffering.
So how do we help people in suffering to open that crack of maybe without being insensitive and insulting to their pain?
Right. It's so interesting because this is one of my little obsessions because of how people come up to me all the time. I actually did a podcast. Like, it doesn't matter if you're making the best of it or you believe the best is happening, here you are.
Yeah.
And so
I'm gonna have
always,
to listen to that. Yep.
yeah, if I could, I remember these. Sometimes I don't remember my episodes, but it really just,
Yeah.
it's really how I really feel. I think first we have to have an awareness
Hmm.
of our experience and we have to honor ourselves and our feelings
Hmm.
because I had maybe, and I was devastated and I was heartbroken, right? And even if you had maybe, you would have had, you were sick and you were suffering. So, suffering is suffering. And that's just a part of life.
Hmm.
And I think as we're processing our feelings, then we have to really look at what's our perspective.
Hmm.
Are we telling the story that this happened and I'm doomed and life will never get better?
Yeah.
Am I telling the story that I'm I can't go on anymore. I don't want to live like this. Like, we have to look at an honest view of our perspective. And often we'll find that we are suffering, but we're in the maybe not. We're in a place where we can't imagine, we just want our old life back.
Right.
And so we're resisting. So,
Yeah.
yeah, through that, you have to feel your feelings, but you have to accept.
Yeah.
And when you accept it, it's not that you say, I like it,
Mm.
but you're saying, this is happening.
Yeah.
And I remember, Lady Macbeth said, what'd she say? When what is done cannot be undone, right? And there was something about that statement that when my husband left, it took a while, but when I landed in that, I was in so much pain, but I stopped arguing with this exists.
Yeah.
Because when we're resisting life, we are in pain.
Yeah.
So become aware
Yeah.
and you accept.
Yeah.
That's you.
Yeah.
Then you're like, okay, I don't like this, but this is what is.
Mhm.
And there is so much power and strength to landing in acceptance because you are standing in a place, whether you like it or not, but thank goodness you are standing in a place.
You can own your truth and then you can own your narrative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then for me, when the moment's right, start playing with maybe. What's my biggest fear? My biggest fear is this has happened to me and I am never going to get better. My biggest fear is my husband left. I'm never going to fall in love again. My biggest fear is the market crashed and I'm not going to be able to afford my mortgage. And then you ask yourself, just like everything else, am I absolutely certain that this fear is true? And the beauty of it is cannot be certain of anything.
Yeah.
So it's the one moment where you're like, thank goodness there's no certainty.
Mhm.
Then you do the maybe practice. And again, it sounds so simple, but if you're in an incredible amount of pain and you write, maybe everything could still be okay. Maybe there are many ways to be okay.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll figure this out. Maybe I need to be patient. Maybe there's something in this moment for me to experience.
Mhm.
That's a really big one. Maybe my thought's not true. And all you're doing is you're giving other thoughts other than that fear. It's almost like you can put your fear in a little test tube or you could throw it in the ocean.
Yeah.
And the more maybe statements you have, the more, yeah, the fear could still be there, but there are other possibilities. And then you get specific. Maybe I could call my friend Joe and ask him, maybe this, maybe that. Maybe I could just eat a good meal. And there's a little light that starts to grow because you realize you don't know for sure you're doomed. And you might have to do these maybe statements every day or not, but all of a sudden you can't argue with the fact that something else could happen other than your biggest fear. And that gives somebody a little hope
Mhm.
and they're going to change. And that for me is the practice. And I literally, and I'm gonna send you a deck.
I saw those on your website. I love those.
When we're done, I will give you,
Love it.
I wrote the book, okay? And I use these cards every day. I put 4 or 5 next to me. And like maybe I could let this go.
Oh,
I'm
that's so
at a
great.
meeting. I'm
Yeah.
at a meeting, and maybe I could choose peace instead. So I'm at a meeting. I'm just looking at um
This
one
is
of
so great.
um maybe
I
everything is
love your, I looked at your journal too. I'm like, that's because I'm a sucker for any kind of
yeah.
journal or notebook as a writer. Maybe
Maybe
I need to.
maybe I need to wait a little long for the answer. So I'm in a meeting
Yeah.
and I'm a maybe. I'm obsessed with maybe.
Mhm.
And they caught me. I'm at a meeting and someone tells me something that I could have never imagined. Like I could be sitting there at the Motherhood Center and someone could say, "Do you know that insurance company is now paying us 20% of what they used to?" I mean, literally like like from left field and a bang, and I could go rigid. Me, I could get tight.
Yeah.
And I glance over and I'm like, well, maybe everything could still be okay. And maybe, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I don't like that this is happening,
Mhm.
but nothing's permanent. And I'm going to use that to my advantage.
Mhm.
Then I come back to the field of maybe.
Mhm.
So even I need reminders,
Yeah.
and people could use, they could make their own cards on index cards. They could write things down. I mean, you don't need the cards to use maybe, but
It helps.
the more you remember.
Yeah.
And then what the best part is, like you had this life experience where you lost your ideal job, you got sick, you became a writer, and now you're in a different place.
Mhm.
If deciding that, you could decide the perspective you're going to have, but what's so interesting is that sometimes maybe creates faith,
Mhm.
that it's a cognitive tool that you're first using with your relationship with uncertainty, but if it happens enough times,
Mhm.
you cultivate faith in the unknown, and then you live differently. You order a different meal.
Yeah.
You have different friends. Like everything becomes different.
Yeah.
So I know that there are places I still get stuck and
Mhm.
I use the maybe, but I also have this faith riding that I don't mind uncertainty because I know it's going to bring new things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a little exciting, but it's okay. You could use it as a cognitive tool.
Mhm.
You could use it for stress. You could use it for presence. How whatever's good for the person. But faith in uncertainty,
Mhm.
that's freedom.
Yeah.
That's freedom because, Krishnamurti said, I'm always happy because I don't mind what happens.
Yeah.
I will never achieve that because I mind when my
I
kids,
think I mind certain things.
yeah, but you know something? You mind less.
You do. Yeah.
That's what's beauty. Like for me, it's like I look at life like where can I capture little pieces of freedom? Like
Mhm.
I know I'll never be totally free. I'm attached to my kids, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I like my home,
Yeah.
but because I don't fear uncertainty, I can hold them well.
Mhm.
And there are other areas where I am free.
Mhm.
And suffering comes from our attachment and our lack of freedom. So that's what's cool too. Like
Yeah.
even just to, wow, alleviate 30% of your suffering in your life and have 30% more freedom.
Yeah. That would
I'll
be
take it
awesome.
any day,
You know
right?
what's funny? Yeah, it's funny. There's a study that I recently heard of, a research study where they looked at people's tolerance to uncertainty, and what they learned is that people who do not cope with uncertainty are more susceptible to conspiracy theories because it explains things to them. And I thought that was fascinating.
Isn't that amazing?
I
Isn't
know.
that amazing?
Yeah.
It all comes down to whether or not we could feel that one I never heard. That's
Yep. I'll send you the link to it. It was on the Hidden Brain podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with Hidden Brain or not, but he interviewed the researcher who talks about the work they've done in uncertainty and how people are most susceptible to conspiracy theories when they are uncomfortable with being
I
uncertain.
want to know. Oh, I'm gonna dig deep on that one. I love that. Like I've read ones where people would rather feel physical pain.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like there's one where I don't know if you heard about this one, but there's like they're attaching people to this computer and they shock people when they see a snake like
Hmm.
under a cup and they have to keep choosing under the cup. And every time there's a snake, it shocks them a little bit. And if they found out that people would rather be shocked
Hmm.
and know that the snake is going to be there than have the uncertainty of like of whether I'm not explaining it well, but if
But no, I know what you mean. They're like, okay, give me the shot because I can't handle a spider
not
that comes
knowing
out
whether
of
or not
there.
you're going to give me a shock, and it's like,
Right.
right, and then it also
Yeah.
there's studies that
Yeah.
it harms, it raises cortisol level, it
Hmm.
affects our working memory. So it's amazing that there's this relationship with uncertainty that affects who you marry, the job you're going to take, how what your perspective is going to be, right?
Yep.
Whether whether or not you're going to endure pain, and now whether or not you're going to become a conspiracy theorist. So
That's hilarious. That's funny. I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I didn't forget any of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Um, I think we covered that one. There was a couple of cliche lines that, not even cliche, but things I hear people say that when I was reading your book that came to mind, and I wanted to be able to rebut those autoplays in my mind. Like there's one I hear all the time, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Have you heard people say that? And it drives,
well, that's
and that's
it.
like, and I want to push back on that because it doesn't allow people the room to grow and change. And I really don't like that saying.
I think we do that because we're afraid of uncertainty. So
Yeah.
what we do is we reach for what we know, and what we know is based on our past behavior.
Hmm.
But if we come to the moment and we don't resist what is,
Hmm.
and we choose to be in maybe, that's not so. So I think that if you're addicted to certainty, then yes.
Yeah.
And can it be different? I am not the same person I was 6 years ago,
Oh.
and I can tell
Mhm.
you are not the person that you were
Yeah.
growing up. So if we do the work,
Yeah.
then the past really is the past,
That's
and
right.
moment, every breath is a new beginning. But we have to choose that, and
Yeah.
if you choose that this moment is a new beginning, that means that you're believing that life can change, and uncertainty is a place of infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
So it's choice of how you come to the moment and how you view your past and your future.
Yeah. What do you want to say to people now who are feeling so very uncertain times and feeling stress around decisions that are being made in our communities in our country and all of that uncertainty and the angst that is around it? What do you want people to hear?
When we see something we don't like, it's real, right? So we're all looking at a situation where systems are being undermined. That there are, even just if you look at the fundamental programs like Medicaid, Social Security, like these are fundamental values of this country across the board, Democrats, Republicans.
Yeah.
So we have to say, like, we can't turn our back on what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But what happens is that when we believe that we're doomed,
Mhm.
again, and we fixate that it can't get better, we're not going to leave our homes and speak up. And we have to remember that because nobody knows the future,
Mhm.
nobody knows that everything you say and everything you do matters. And that's how I live my life. Like I just started writing all these articles for Salon. I
Mhm.
was just like, okay, I'm worried that women are not going to have health care.
Right.
I'm just going to keep writing articles about it, and maybe it'll help one person leave their house and write their congressman. Like,
That's right.
I never give up because everyone's trying to sell you doom and gloom.
Mhm.
And what's so fascinating is those are the people that are addicted to certainty.
Yeah.
The most elevated
Or the
view.
money they make on your uncertainty.
Absolutely. The most elevated view in the room, the strongest person in the room is the dreamer.
Mhm.
It's the one that hopes.
Yeah.
It's like, can I hold what I'm seeing? Can I hold this moment and at the same time know that uncertainty is my best friend?
Mhm.
And those are the people that could handle uncertainty and know that until our last breath, there's hope, there's maybe. That's what I would say. Don't let anyone sell you the end. But at the same time, you have to know what's going on. Like I'm very in
Yeah.
tune what's happening, but I'm like, okay, well, maybe
Mhm.
I can contribute a little bit. So know that there's hope. Don't let anyone take your hope away. That's what I would say.
And maybe, just maybe, this will prompt the kindness revolution that this world needs.
Absolutely, because that's what we're lacking.
That's right.
What
That's
we're
right.